It says High Falls. It said Ojai Falls. And that is when the fight started. Oh Hi was distributed by Sony Pictures Classics. It was written, produced, and directed by Sophie Brooks, and was written by and stars Molly Gordon, who also served as a producer on this film. And Molly Gordon has been in films such as Shiva Baby and Theater Camp, and she plays Iris, who is going off on a weekend getaway with her new man, Issac, played by Logan Lerman. Yes, Percy Jackson himself, who was in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. He's also in Fury. He's a great dramatic actor. He's got good comedic timing. He's good in action. Logan Lerman, Molly Gordon, quietly building up quite the filmographies for themselves. So, these two crazy young people going off on this weekend getaway to this Airbnb. Now, why do they call it an Airbnb? It's not floating in a lake. It's not floating above our heads like the landmass in Landscape with Invisible Hand. That's a deep cut. Who has seen that movie? Who has actually seen Landscape with Invisible Hand? I drove like an 80-mile round trip to watch that. Nevertheless, enough about that. It's not even the floating continent in Final Fantasy 3/6, depending on your localization. And if you have a Super Famicom that you actually have retrofitted to be able to play it here in the US, good job on you, you rich people. Not even the one where Kefka moved the statues and then pushed the Emperor up, and then he unleashed Ultima 2, Electric Boogaloo, and the World of Ruin happened. No, not even the floating continent there. Not even something that's up in the air tonight. Oh, Lord. Doo-doo-doo. The whole point is, I don't know why they call it an Airbnb, but that being said, these two crazy young people, we see a little bit of a scene in the beginning that actually leads us to the events that led to that scene in the beginning of the film. More on that here in a bit. But they're just happy, and they clearly care for each other. They're very, very nice to each other. Issac obviously does care about Iris, is very, very chivalrous, shall we say. They end up even getting some strawberries from a local stand. And they are, they have a bunch of groceries. They're at this, again, why they call it an Airbnb. Let me get off of that subject. The whole point is they are there. They're at this nice house. It's got a lake. They swim. They run into a neighbor, Steve, played by David Cross, who's actually got some funny scenes in this. Not enough, in my opinion, but it wasn't about him. But he made the most of it. And then they have a nice time of eating, sharing feelings, a lot of the sexual intercourse that young people love to have, especially the unprotected sexual intercourse. What is wrong with y'all? We need to reduce the population. Have your kids spayed or neutered. Goodbye, everybody. No, in all seriousness, we, just need to make sure that we protect ourselves before we wreck our lives. But anyway, let's just say something happens that necessitates a very awkward situation. It gets absolutely out of control, and that's the most spoiler-free premise I can come up with. This was the Regal Mystery movie, which is why I was able to see it a little bit earlier. And for those that haven't seen the trailer, that's the most I can say without spoiling. For those that have seen the trailer, the best way I can describe this is, remember how I said Iris? Iris was the name of Sophie Thatcher's character in Companion. This is like if you had Companion actually be funny and actually make the most of its premise. Now, no, it has nothing to do with the stuff that Companion had. Outside of the relationship stuff, outside of being honest and everything and that kind of stuff. It's not sci-fi-ish and horror-ish like that, but it does have a bit of psychological horror. It's like a more comedic Misery, just without the ankle breaking. Rest in peace, James Caan. Kathy Bates is absolutely tremendous in that. It is quite funny, actually. I can see some people not appreciating the awkwardness of the comedy moments and stuff like this, and the situation could turn some people off, but it does dive into a bit of the relationship issues that some people may have. Some people may have fear of commitment. Some people may overly commit. The whole thing is about communication. Now, in all honesty, only one particular character is really in the wrong here. There's one that's sort of minorly in the wrong, but to be perfectly honest, it doesn't justify what ended up happening. We don't know enough about these characters beyond little bits of information that we receive, especially from Iris's mom. The main thing that sold me on watching this, though, is the fact that Iris's friend Max shows up a little bit into this, played by the very, very gifted, the very, very funny, and the very, very gorgeous Geraldine Viswanathan, I always screw that last name up, I'm sorry. She was in Blocker, she was in Thunderbolts, Drive Away Dolls, You're Cordially Invited. Even if it's a bad project, I will watch her because She is hilarious. And again, gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And also, I do have to say, John Reynolds plays her boyfriend, Kenny. They did not kill Kenny, I will say that much, so no, you bastards. But, yeah, we end up seeing this awkward situation play out and everything. It's just a shade under 90 minutes, so it at least doesn't overstay its welcome. I guess the issues I might have is the fact that the ending seems a little bit rushed. And there are things in this that possibly could trigger how one might feel about certain things and giving certain things to your partner. And sure, it's a little bit silly, it's a little bit ridiculous, it's a little bit rock and roll. Islands in the Stream roll, RR. But I end up actually enjoying this movie quite a bit. It wasn't the most perfect thing I've seen, but I was very entertained, and I very much enjoyed it. And again, Geraldine, quite good. And Molly and Logan had really good chemistry. So that being said, I am going to get into spoilers. That's just your warning right there. So 3, 2, 1, in theaters soon, spoilers. So, there was a line from the mother after Iris and Isaac had a fight where it says, well, you can't drink whiskey. Remember what happened last time? Then we remember something a little bit earlier that Iris said. After they had visited the strawberry stand and accidentally hit the stand when the guy went forward instead of backwards, and they bought a bunch of strawberries as a way to make it up to her. The strawberry vendor was very much flirting with Mr. Isaac. And that is something where you could see the twinge of jealousy by Molly Gordon. And Molly actually did a great job here playing the jealous lover, shall we say. But she also mentions, don't let me drink whiskey or I'll get frisky. That's not the worst thing, but also if it unleashes your inhibitions to the point that you are going to possibly hurt somebody, it's best not to drink that. So they end up talking about their various relationships. She talks about being with a guy named Toby from the time she was 16 for 7 years, and he kind of broke up with her out of nowhere. She then later shares, that she thought of, possibly stabbing him, which is a little bit awkward to say, and probably should have been the first red flag to maybe not do this. And there are mentions of their third date, which was in a bar. We see a little bit later on that Iris was not in the best shape mentally at that point, had a pretty lousy day. But what ends up basically happening is they do have a little bit of the sex and everything, and they find some bondage stuff, and she doesn't want to be tied up, she ties him up. And there are worse ways to spend your night than being tied up by Molly Gordon, I would just say that much. And then basically she decides not to free him because he kind of confesses while cuffed, by the way, fully cuffed. I'm talking legs, I'm talking arms. Not his dick, thankfully. His dick wasn't cuffed. That would have hurt. She's like, our weekend together or whatever. It's like, well, we're not together. Now, he should have probably waited until he got uncuffed before he said this. But, I like you, but we're not exclusive. Well, yeah, we are. They have talks about getting their, not being with other people, but he's been with other people. And that was something that he wasn't honest about. But still, it doesn't justify it doesn't justify her leaving him cuffed. She leaves him cuffed for so goddamn long. Thinking that, she won't let him get away and everything. Talks to her mother. And her mother says, well, men don't really know what they want and everything. Your dad wanted to skip out on me an hour before we gave our wedding vows. And she says, Mom, you're divorced. Yeah, but that was my fault. And basically, it's really just the Iris and Isaac show for a good while. Now, in the very, very, very opening scene, Max shows up and we see Geraldine, and yeah, more of her. But I did something really bad, is what Iris said to Max. And then we cut to 33 hours earlier and start doing this and everything. So she's got him tied up, and she stays up all night looking at this therapist stuff, listening to this self-help therapist, and has an idea. 12 hours, let me prove to you that let me show you the real me. And if that doesn't work out, then I'll free you. And she tells him stories about herself, even gets to the point where she talked about a dance that she did, and in school, and he wanted to see it. He wanted to see a video, that kind of stuff, which she just happened to have on her laptop, a little bit weird. And she ends up basically, like talking to him, this kind of stuff, and he says, well, it's been 12 hours. So this kind of is, like, I'm not going to do anything but let me go. So, have you changed your mind? I don't know. Now, he really should have just played along again. I mean, yes, lying, that kind of stuff, you should be honest. But to get out of this situation, I think you could lie a little bit. Now, she uncuffs one of his legs. And had she just started with the hand, he would have been able to probably break the leg once, but it's fine. And because he doesn't basically agree to be with her, she leaves him cuffed up. Because she misunderstands the term cuffing season, which I know is not how it actually works, based on what I've heard, but nevertheless. She ends up contacting Max, and Geraldine shows up looking, again, as only she could look. I mean, good God. I also always forget she's from Australia, or the environs. But anyway, she ends up arriving with Kenny. I do have to say John Reynolds actually has some good lines in this, has some good awkward situations. He ends up seeing that Issac is there. And essentially, we end up with them having to figure out how to get out of the situation. Kenny has a dad that's a senator, so he's probably okay, but Max is an accomplice, and Iris is clearly going to go to jail. Now, there is one point where Kenny, who knows Issac, is talking to him and opens a window and stuff like that. It's a little bit stuffy. He's reading this book. It was about, like, blindness or something like that. I forget the exact title because they mentioned it a couple times, but it was blinding blindness or whatnot and what have you. And that was something that, he was reading, and then she talked about her classic movies earlier at the lake and talked about Casablanca. We'll always have Paris. And Kenny's reading to him and this kind of stuff while Max and Iris are trying to figure out what's going on. Then Max is talking to her sister and says, hey, my cousin's into witchcraft and we're going to do this spell and everything. We're going to have him drink this thing and he's going to forget about it. Because earlier they had said, let's give him a head injury. But it's like, no, we can't do that. We'll kill him. Wait, my cousin knows witchcraft. We'll just do that. They mix the brew and Kenny drinks some. And because he's like, well, let me put him at ease so I can forget about this. He does that. He gives it to, Issac as well, and everything seems okay. They're sleeping in the spare room. Iris curls up next to Logan. Again, there are worse situations to deal with than Molly Gordon sleeping next to you. Also, was a point where they were her and Geraldine were doing the spell, and they got naked in front of a fire. Bless that cameraman. Bless that cameraman's all I'm going to say. And then having a talk. He's freed, and basically he has doubts about himself. He has commitment issues. He talked about this with Kenny. He has a dream where everything seems to be going okay. There's flashbacks to the time where he was with Iris in the bar. And then there was also a bit of a dream sequence where she was singing Islands in the Stream. And she said, instead of I love you, I hate you. Because Kenny described reptilian-like brains, we're not supposed to eat these poison berries, but now we have it where we'll remember the bad stuff 4 times more than we'll remember the good stuff. So that's the doubt and everything, and he doesn't want to end up committed because he realizes heartache could always end up being just a stone's throw away because his dad ended up cheating on his mom with the neighbor, apparently, and I guess that really scarred him. Now, at the same time, I mean, he should have been honest about that, but also Iris is just a tiny bit absolutely off, maybe they're on opposite sides of the coins. He's afraid of commitment, she's a little bit too ready to commit, and then they end up, the next morning, Issac doesn't remember anything. He doesn't remember any of this or whatever. And all this, and then he was talking to them, and it's all great, and Max and, Kenny are there, still, because they slept there, but she tried to sneak him out before, but then, no, he doesn't remember anything, it's fine, they're going to make pancakes, but we forgot the flour in the car, so he gets the keys. Oh wait, he just escapes because he had the window opened because it was stuffy. That's also because he overheard their plan, so he was able to play dumb, get away. But then the police end up calling. Oh shit, he went to the police. No, he wrecked the car and he busted his ankle. And so she goes off to really get him. And they have a heart to heart and realize that maybe they're not meant to be together and that kind of stuff, because even Max says, you got to meet at the right time. If my parents had met at a different time, even a year before, he wouldn't have gotten with her mom. And then he gets taken into the ambulance. He doesn't want to be strapped down, though. Don't blame him after all those strap stuff. And says, we'll always have Ojai. And he's like, what? And she's like, never mind. And then they basically take him away to get medical treatment. We don't know if he ended up telling the police. I would imagine at that point he probably didn't. And he admitted that he should have been more honest with her. But at the time, she still didn't need to freaking tie him up. And this would be the same thing if the gender roles were reversed. In fact, it'd be a lot more uncomfortable if they did that. But we get a couple crash sequences. We get one of the ambulance driving away, and then we get another one where Kenny is playing music on a guitar. And that's it. That is Ojai. So, yeah, it's entertaining enough. I mean, I could definitely see some people having some issues with it. And while there are flaws, as far as a project that, with some star power that could help launch a career. Sophie has done some other projects, but this is something that could really help, boost her career. So, A-. I was entertained by it. It's not something I'm necessarily probably going to put in the upper echelon of my films this year, but is definitely something I will, revisit when it hits streaming. So I encourage you guys to check it out in theaters. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Renthland. Until we meet again, happy trails to you.